All right, let's try this chapter 9 and 10. Homework. This is in week 9. Excuse me, in coursework. Let me start this thing. Let's go. Begin. Fairly straightforward, this thing. So, question 1. A carbon tax on fossil fuels is likely to cause the price of goods produced by the firm that use the fuels to, of course, it's going to be a tax and it's going to increase the price of the good, right? Fairly simplistic here, that question. Andy does not bother to lock the door to his house because he has theft insurance. This is an example of, and again, it's going to be moral hazard. What is moral hazard? There'll be a question of this on the final multiple choice question, but if you go to question number 5, I'm skipping ahead. Um, Here is what moral hazard is defined as. Moral hazard is more likely to arise when one side of an economic relationship cannot observe the behavior of those on the other side. So the insurance company does not know that Andy does not lock his door. They would probably have a definite opinion about that. But again, Andy knows he locked his door. The insurance company does not. So the insurance company is, in a sense, kind of on the hook. Basically, moral hazard will allow for risky behavior. Um, and the problem is when it happens in the banking industry is when we can all suffer with this. But deposit insurance, and again, this is with banks, but every bank that operates nowadays has to buy the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, uh, basically insurance for money in the bank. So if the bank fails, the federal government will pay up the money that depositors have, up to around $600,000, I think. But deposit insurance creates a moral hazard that depositors have less incentive to monitor the bank. Yeah, true, right? I'm not really worried about my lowly few $1,000s in Chase Manhattan Bank because I know if Chase goes under, the federal government will pay me back. If John drives more recklessly because he has good automotive insurance, this is an example of moral hazard. It's true, right? There has been studies that people that do not have car insurance in some states don't have to have car insurance. They are better drivers because they're a little more worried about getting into an accident. Um, so it's one problem of this moral hazard is there's a little more recklessness about. Again, it's more for us. It's going to be a question about the banking system with this recklessness. So, as question 6 asks, suppose that lenders believe that the government will provide assistance if too many lenders' borrowers do not pay back their loans. If a lender expects government assistance, and again, this is what happened in 2008 with the banking crisis, right? It really comes to a head in September when Lehman Brothers, an investment bank, basically goes under. They go bankrupt. And the federal government decided not to bail them out because it would encourage moral hazard of other banks doing, risky, other risky investments. So let Lehman Brothers go under, and we'll teach the industry a lesson. The problem was Lehman Brothers went under, and then the whole banking system froze up just a few hours later because everyone was afraid about whether their bank would go next, whether their bank would go bankrupt. So the federal government quickly abandoned that idea of moral hazard and brought the 8 biggest banks down into Washington and basically gave them billions of dollars to show the public that they would bail out those banks if there were any future problems like Lehman's. Um, so this is why should we allow banks to get so big that we cannot afford not to bail them out? Was that proper English? I don't think so, but but again, suppose the lenders, I believe that, right, will provide assistance, right? It makes loan borrowers who are less likely. Um, it increases the rate of borrowers do not change the value. Right? It makes loans to borrowers who are even less likely to repay them. Right? They'll have this more risky behavior. It's kind of like driving erratically if you have really good insurance. Same sort of philosophy. Question 7. The existence of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This is the FDIC. Look, when you go to a bank, they got that cute little gold sticker. It's about this big on the door. And again, this increases the risk and moral hazard in the savings and loan industry, and it does. It's kind of a trade-off that we do. That's why there are a lot of heavy regulations on banks to have other ways to avoid this risk that they take on. So Moving on. I can see asking this kind of question on the final, right? This one up at the FDIC, because it should be in there's a question about banking we're going to talk about later in the semester. A carbon tax could reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by raising the price of gasoline and reducing driving. Yes. But then, we got the all of the above, so we got to take a look. Raising the price of reducing electricity, right? The quantity demanded by reducing the fossil fuels burn. Yeah, it does that too. So it's got to be all of the above for this one. Kind of a straight, if you read these three answers, they're fairly straightforward. A pollution tax is, there are a lot of A's here in this test. It's a method used to internalize external cost, right? Again, if I pollute as a producer and it goes up into the air, once they put a tax on that pollution, then it's a cost to me instead of just letting the wind drift it down the road. So they're being redundant here. Another question, pollution tax, right? Decreases the price. No, it increases, of course, the price of a tax good. It's kind of straightforward. Producers will take external costs into account when they actually got to pay for them. Instead of letting the pollution go with the wind, they got to actually get taxed, so then they have to deal with it. Apply to perfectly competitive labor markets. Perfectly competitive. Just like that perfect competition. Right? The marginal principle tells us firms to hire workers. And again, this is going to be a marginal revenue versus marginal cost answer, right? I can always tell. So again, marginal revenue product of the last worker hired, again, the revenue equals the wage, which is the cost. So this is marginal revenue, marginal cost. I like this question. I'll probably put this question on the final. I should remind myself. I'll make a note. If labor productivity increases, I'm going to talk about labor productivity more on Monday. I kind of didn't really talk about it. But this is basically, productivity is how many people it takes to produce goods. So if we have the same number of people working, but they're producing more stuff, labor productivity goes up, and we all improve our lives, theoretically. So if labor productivity increases, the marginal revenue product curve will shift up, right? And profit maximization, quantity of labor demanded, will increase. So this is up and increase. I'll talk about this thing on Monday, this labor productivity, because there's an interesting article in today's paper about how we don't really need undocumented immigrants in this country, because if we got rid of all of them, it would force our own labor to be more productive. So we'd have to work on more labor productivity. It's an interesting argument, but I don't think I agree with it, but it is interesting. All right, question 14. Which of the following the long run impact of an increase in wages? What happens if wages? This is what I talked about in class the other day, right? What happens if we increase the minimum wage? A lot of McDonald's stores will go to using tablets at the front counter instead of labor because it'll be cheaper. So this is this last one. The quantity demanded of labor decreases because firms will have an incentive to use other inputs instead of labor. Again, McDonald's using the input of tablets instead of having that people in the front. So easy to do. Hopefully this homework is fine. We'll talk more about productivity on Monday. And useful for people doing their gender papers too, looking at productivity of women in the workforce. So let's make sure I got this all right, or I'm gonna have to do this thing all over again. Where did I get? It doesn't tell me. I got 140 out of 140. Oh, thank God. 8 minutes. So this is not that hard, right? So any questions, you can always email me. Let me turn this thing off.